Welcome to Unlimited Parenting, where we discuss having children with disabilities or special healthcare needs. I'm your host, Allison, and with me today is a very special guest, Idaho parent and IPUL board member, Valerie. Valerie has generously agreed to share her child's diagnosis story and so much more with us today. So let's get into the stuff and the things.
Love it here. Like last time I renewed my driver's license, I did the 8-year thing. So I don't plan on leaving for a while. So I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and right now I do the billing and insurance for a marriage and family therapy clinic here in Twin Falls. And I've been married to my husband for 16 years, and we have 4 children. And pay attention to the ages here because it gets a little crazy. I have twin girls who are 12, and they're going to be in 7th grade. And then we have an 11-year-old son who will be going into 6th grade, and then a 9-year-old daughter who will be going into 4th grade. So that's 12, 11, and then almost 10. So I do have kids that are incredibly close in age. It wasn't exactly planned, but it has worked out.
Not only are they so close in age, but you have twins.
Yeah. And then they're all kind of the same height. So people think I have quadruplets.
Oh, no.
When we're out walking around. And at this point, I'm just kind of like, yes, I do, basically. So the one we're going to be talking about today is my son, the 11-year-old. And he has autism spectrum disorder and also has intellectual disability. And kind of throughout his life, it's one has kind of been a little bit more obvious than the other right now, thanks to a whole bunch of early intervention, whole bunch of therapy. It's actually, the autism isn't as noticeable, in quotes. It's kind of more the intellectual disability, I think, is what if people are interacting with him, they're like, oh, you're not quite 11.
Oh, it might be what they notice first.
Yeah. Whereas they're not going to notice like visual spinning or anything that he's doing, but the autism is still very much there. It's just not the first thing you notice as you talk to him. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of give our interesting little timeline for his diagnosis. I think some parents might really relate to parts of this. I just want to kind of share a regular mom's story, trying to figure out what's going on with her kid. Know if I should be worried about this or not.
Right.
And so, yeah. So I did what you do, and I asked on Facebook. and I had a lot of really good responses from my friends. So I just asked on my own, like, Facebook page, like me, not a mom's group or anything, but just my actual group of friends. And there were people that said, oh, it's fine. My kid did the same thing and now he never stopped talking. Don't worry about it. And there were other people that said, oh, bring it up at his next well check. The doctor can screen. And then other people mentioned, oh, maybe it's time to have him evaluated. But the very best advice I got in this situation was a friend who I think she is a speech language pathologist. And she was like, you need to call up your early intervention. And she even gave me the link. At the time we were living in Texas, she didn't live in Texas. She took the time to Google our early childhood intervention program in Texas and then dropped the link for me on Facebook, which
that's kind
of become my the way I like to interact with other parents. If I'm giving advice, I'm also giving a link because it was so easy to then just click that link and be like, oh, these are the qualifications I need to look at. These are where the offices are located. I didn't have to go Google it. So we were in Texas and it was called Early Childhood Intervention. Here in Idaho, it's the infant toddler program, but it's that intervention for kids that are under 3 that need help with developmental milestones. So I was able to go to an office and do an evaluation with my son, and then he qualified for it, and they sent a speech therapist to our home, and we did therapy at home, which I really appreciated, having 4 kids under the age of 4 at that time.
Yeah, you didn't want to go anywhere.
Yeah, there was no way we were going anywhere. And the funny story is his little sister, his baby sister, sat in on all the things. and she was like making sound progress right along with him.
So was it 2 for 1?
Yeah, so she made the B sound before he did, which was just hilarious for all of us. So he made progress. He didn't make a lot of progress, but he did make progress. And so I was like, oh, we're going to get this solved. It's great. So fast forward a little bit. My husband was in the military, so that's what we were doing in Texas. He goes to a different duty station in Alabama, and so we moved to Alabama, and that's where we have my son's 3-year-old well check. And I go into that being like, my son also seems to have problems with sensory processing. He hated loud rooms. He didn't like to wear shoes. In some ways, he seemed sensory seeking. In some ways, he seemed sensory avoiding. And so I wanted to get a referral for occupational therapy for sensory processing. So we go into this well check with a doctor I'd never met before. And he takes one look at my son and is like, have you thought about autism? And I was so offended because I was like, you don't know us. Like, what are you even
Right.
I was like, you can't just say that. But I think he just learned over time, like with these military families, I don't know if I'm going to see him again. I'm just going to say what I say and let the chips fall where they may, because he did put in the referral for an autism evaluation. And, fast forward a few months, my son did come back as autistic on that evaluation. And so I'm retroactively grateful for that doctor. But at the time, I was very offended.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
What are you saying?
Maybe some changes in bedside manner.
Yeah. I was like, dude, what? And looking back on it, I'm like, of course, if you put a communication delay with a sensory processing problem, like you basically, it's like, that's autism.
Right.
But I'm new to this whole world. I just didn't know. So I was really, really frustrated that he said it that way, but ultimately grateful because he didn't say, oh, let's wait and see. Or he didn't say, I don't see it. I do appreciate that he was direct about it. He could have been a little kinder.
Right, but you were taken seriously, so you appreciated that part.
Yeah, I did appreciate that part. Yeah, he could have said it better, but I do appreciate it. So at that same time, right before we got the referral, or as we were waiting for the referral appointment, because there's always a long wait for these. My son started at the developmental preschool, and he could have started when he turned 3 in the spring, but we were in the middle of the move. So I just had him start in the fall. And so his sisters were in the pre-K4 program, and then he was in like their pre-K3 program. And it was really cute. They had like a pod set up. So they had 4 pre-K classes all in one big room with just dividers. So all 3 kids were technically in the same room, and they would go out and play on the playground together. It was actually a really cute little setup that all 3 of them went at the same time. And he was there kind of on a trial basis. I don't quite remember the terminology, but it was based on his speech delay. They were gathering data, and there was all these things that they kind of needed to do. And then I remember at like our first, what's the name of the first IEP meeting? What's the official name of it when you're like getting approved for an IEP?
Your eligibility meeting?
The eligibility, that would be it. At the eligibility meeting, we just got the autism diagnosis. And so I remember the SPED teacher, being like, well, this is the point where we would be looking at all the data for his speech delay and seeing if he qualified for an IEP. And she's like, but we have the autism diagnosis. So he qualifies. And she like marked a big X somewhere on the paperwork. And I was like, oh, this autism diagnosis is a good thing. Because that was like the first time I realized that, like, oh, if you have a diagnosis, you get access to resources. Like,
right, we're opening doors here.
Together. Yeah. And so it was like, oh, I'm kind of glad we have this. And so that was a big moment for me. But I was still kind of in denial that he actually had autism. I was like, oh no, because it had been kind of borderline. It's not super severe. And I know that's, what is severe, what is high functioning, those are kind of all relative terms. But, even the psychologist who did it had been like, we really could go either way on this. And, but she ultimately did go with the diagnosis. But I was still kind of in denial, like, oh no, we're just not my son, And it wasn't until, so they did this pumpkin day thing at the preschool, and my son didn't want to take the picture on his own. So I was sitting there with him holding the pumpkin, and he's crying in the picture. So they send the picture home to me, because they send it home to all the parents, and I glance at it. I don't know what it is. I thought it was like the cover of a brochure for parents of special needs. So I'm like, why are they sending this home? I don't need it. And then I look at the picture. I'm like, oh, that's me and my son. Yeah, maybe there actually is a need here. So that was kind of another turning point where I was like, okay, this is my world. This is our life right now. We're going to do this.
All right. Literally and figuratively the poster child, right?
Yes. And what's really sweet, actually, though, is the next year, they did the same thing. They did pumpkin day again, and I went again, and he picked up his own pumpkin, sat on the little hay bale by himself, said cheese, like you could see the progress in the two pictures. It's really amazing.
Oh,
yeah. So that developmental preschool in Alabama was amazing. Like, we just had good staff there. They taught him so much. He got so used to being around other kids. Like, it really met so many of his needs to be in there. So I cannot say enough about, like, getting kids into those early intervention school programs. Like, get them in as soon as they qualify, because they're so good. We were trying to do speech therapy and occupational therapy privately, but we had to drive 30 minutes out of our area to go to them. My other kids hated waiting in the like the break room, not the break room, the waiting room.
Yeah.
And so to have all those services and everything happening at the preschool was just life-saving.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Wonderful. Yeah. So that was kind of the, like, initial diagnosis and then acceptance phase. And then we just kind of moved on to the, like, how do we manage and live with this and thrive with this phase, which we still are in, really. But because we were a military family, it kind of spans more than just, like, Idaho. Like, we were still in Alabama at this point. So I'm going to kind of bridge some of that to get us to Idaho. So you can kind of see when IPUL comes into this. So let's see. So we're in Alabama. We're doing well. Oh, he was in ABA in Alabama as well. I don't know if this still exists, but I'm going to mention it in case you have any military families and it still exists. There was a program, maybe there still is a program called the ECHO program through TRICARE. And another autism mom, because it's always another autism mom.
Right.
She told me about it, and she's like, it's going to be a lot of paperwork. It's worth it. And yes, it was a lot of paperwork, but it did get my son into ABA. Insurance covered all of it, and we had a really good lady that would come and she would work on things at home, but she also took him places. I specifically remember her taking him to McDonald's for French fries. And, the French fries were what got him there. But while they were there, they were practicing being in a crowded room and behaving appropriately and things like that. So that was a really good situation. Unfortunately, we just weren't there long enough to really spend much time with that. I think maybe we were with that company for about 6 months before my husband, it was time to move again. So, yeah.
With 4 little kids.
So we had some progress, but then things came up. So my husband ended up leaving the military, and we moved in with his parents in Utah. And fortunately, where we lived, the local preschool or the local elementary school had a preschool for SPED kids, and then they'd also opened it up to quote unquote regular kids who could come in and help, be peers with the SPED kids. And I think that's just a good example of like where you're giving services to children with special needs, but other children are benefiting too, because they wouldn't have had that preschool without the SPED kids needing it.
Exactly.
Preschool isn't really a thing in Utah everywhere through the school districts. And so this was a really special situation for that local school to have that. So I don't know how much the other parents knew how much they were benefiting from being in a class with special needs kids, but it was a benefit for them. And so he finished out his pre-K4 year in Utah. And then we had already decided my husband was going to go to school in Pocatello. He went to ISU. But we needed something to do for the summer. And this is just a fun little aside. I ended up getting a job in Yellowstone National Park, and we moved there for the summer and we lived in a 25-foot RV and with 4 kids.
Oh, what? Well, that doesn't sound very fun, but the other part of it, what an experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, I worked 40 hours a week, and my husband was like the stay-at-home RV dad. He had our kids out doing all sorts of stuff, and my son was just in heaven. But he never fully understood what Yellowstone meant. He just thought that meant geysers. So we'd be sitting, we lived in Canyon Village, and so we're in literally the middle of Yellowstone. He's like, I want to go see Yellowstone National Park.
Look outside your window, buddy.
Yeah, look out the window. But he was in heaven and loved it, and so it was a good experience for our whole family. And then we moved to Pocatello, and we moved in days before the school year started. And I'd been in communication with the school, and I'd been sending them the IEP paperwork. I'd been sending them everything I had. And they kind of dragged their feet a little bit on acknowledging that they had a child with some special needs coming into their school. Knowing what I know now, I think I would have pushed a little bit more, but we were trying to move. And so it was like, whatever, just get him enrolled, and I guess we'll let the chips fall where they may. But I kept being like, he's going to need a lot of help. And I assumed that he was going to go, at the time, I don't know if they still have it, but they had kind of a magnet school for kids with special needs. And I was assuming they were going to have him go there, but they never did. He was always in his mainstream kindergarten class. And I don't know, looking back, if that was the best move, but it is what ended up happening that year. And we made it work, but it was kind of a rough transition for him to suddenly be in a mainstream class after being in kind of these more hybrid type situations that he had been in.
Yeah.
That being said, we loved that school. The staff was amazing. I just don't think that I pushed hard enough for his exact needs. So that year was rough, and partly because I don't think he was in the right class, and partly because at the time Pocatello did kindergarten all day long, every other day. So he would
interesting.
Go to class. Yeah, they don't do it anymore, but because now we have all day kindergarten every day now in the state. But at the time, that's how they had it set up. And so they did, he would go Tuesday, Thursday every week, and then rotating Mondays. So some Mondays he would go, some Mondays he wouldn't. And then when he wasn't at school, he was in daycare. My kids went to the Early Learning Center at ISU, which was fabulous. I cannot say enough about how good that daycare was. But it did make it rough because he would play all day at daycare, and then he would have to go to school the next day and work. And he did not like that. Yeah. I don't think any kid actually would like that inconsistency, but it was really rough for him. And so he was just falling apart by the end of the school year. We kind of all were falling apart. I was like, what day is it? Where are you going today? I don't even know.
Yeah, how do you keep
and
track of that?
I mean, it was just insane. It was just insane. I don't know how anyone handled it. so, and then at daycare, he was starting to fight towards the end of the school year. And so I was like, okay, I know this kid needs intervention. I know he needs some sort of ABA, probably some speech therapy. He was getting a little at school, but it's not quite enough. But between my work schedule, my husband's school schedule, I was just like, there's no time to take him anywhere. Like, we just didn't have the situation. We didn't have family that could take him to an appointment. We were on our own. So, what do you do again? I got on Facebook, and this time I was in a mom's group on Facebook. I think it was Southeast Idaho Autism Moms. We'll give a shout out to that group.
Shout out.
And so I asked on there, and I was just like, is there any sort of therapy that will come to the client? Like, they could come to his daycare and maybe pull him out and do speech therapy, or they could do ABA at the daycare. Like, I'm like, what is there? Does this exist?
How do we get creative?
Yeah. And some mom on there was like, you need to call IPUL. So
shout out to that mom.
Yeah. This is when IPUL enters the story. And so I called IPUL, and there was a lovely staff lady named Amy with you guys at the time, and she walked me through everything. And I was going to check. I'm not sure if I saved the notes that I took, but I feel like I did, because they were like that special to me. Like, these notes contained answers.
The Holy Grail.
My little handwritten, and then she sent me an email with good stuff and links.
You know how important those are.
Yeah, and so she talked me through applying for Children's Developmental Disability Services, and gave me, all the steps and everything. We already had Medicaid, and we already had the autism diagnosis, so we were pretty set. We were like, okay, we got these two things. The problem was, at the time, Liberty, which is the third-party eligibility assessment service people, they had just taken over the contract, and they were working through, I don't know how many months long of a backlog. So I called IPUL maybe April, May of that year. We didn't even get an evaluation till August. And as we were waiting, I was like, I remember telling the daycare leader, I was like, I think all of his behaviors are going to be outgrown by the time we get there.
He's going to be a different kid.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is taking a while. But it did eventually work out, and he did qualify for everything. So then we got assigned a caseworker who was amazing. I can't say enough about her. She doesn't work there anymore, but her name was Lisa, and she was just the best. She had my back all the time. Any question I had, she'd answer. She was great. And so then she gave me a list of the providers in the area, and I think I called one, and that was the one that worked out. And
oh gosh, that's lucky.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know if that's possible today, but it was in 2018.
Oh, those pre-pandemic times, right?
Yes. So we were able to start doing, I never get the initials right, but I know we did HI, we did habilitative intervention, and then there was some other alphabet soup that we were doing. But they were able to send staff to the daycare and start working with my son on appropriate ways to interact with children when you're in a when you're in a room with a bunch of kids and they're all playing. How do you handle that? And so that was a lifeline. And then they also there was they would take him out in the community too. So there was a little bit of work in the daycare and then work in the community. So it was oh, we did it. We got it figured out. Also that fall, his first grade teacher was amazing. My kids have had good teachers, but she stands out among all of them.
Going the extra mile.
So hard with him. Yeah, she worked so hard with him. And at the time, he wasn't nonverbal around me. Like, I wouldn't have said he was nonverbal, but she felt like he came to her class nonverbal and then started talking in her class. So that was huge that, you know, he started talking at school in her class. She also, she was like, do you have him on medication? Because this isn't the kid that was described to me that I would have in my class, because she thought he would be a little bit wilder, I guess. And I was like, honestly, it's the fact that he's all day every day now. We're not on that crazy kindergarten schedule. Like, he knows what to expect every day.
Yeah, consistency helps.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know how anyone handled that Pocatello schedule. It was crazy. One thing I want to say before we move on, I don't want to forget this. My kids were in daycare, and we were able to afford it because of the Idaho Child Care Program.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is another thing that I cannot praise enough. So I do not want to forget to mention that. There's no way I could have afforded to put my kids in daycare without that program. So if people are, weighing the pros and cons of going back to work, but is it going to be worth it daycare wise? Look into Idaho Child Care Program, because it is a lifesaver.
And we can add some, I have a feeling you're going to love this, but we can add some links to those resources in the description for this podcast.
Yeah, put the links in. That's
just for you. Everybody gets a link. You get a link. You get a link.
That's great. Oh, I love that. Okay, so we're up to first grade. My husband finishes his program at ISU, and he graduates. He gets a job in Twin Falls, and then I stay in Pocatello with the kids while we're kind of house hunting, between cities. And it's the summer. And I'm like, okay, I love my son, but he requires a lot of attention. He's a fiddler. He has a lot of energy. I couldn't just leave him alone. And I was like, how am I going to solo parent this child through the summer? Because by then I'd stopped working. And so the kids were home with me all summer. And I was like, oh boy, what are we going to do? So, enter again, children's DDS. We still had a big budget left over. And so my caseworker was able to throw everything into, I never can remember the exact the alphabet soup of acronyms here, but she was able to throw everything into therapy so that my son kind of had the unofficial daycare type of intervention. Yeah. I never remember what it's called. So we did 20 hours of therapy a week that summer, where they had him out doing things. And a lot of times I would meet up at the park with my other kids, and then the therapist would bring my son, and we would hang out. And then when he got overwhelmed, they'd go somewhere else. And, it was just nice to kind of have another adult, just kind of there.
Oh, another set of eyes and help and everything.
Yeah, fully responsible for him. And then I was able to focus on my girls. I remember we made bread one day, and I was like, there is no way we could have done this. He was here. We love him dearly, but there's no way. So,
yeah, it wouldn't have been edible bread after that, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't. I don't even think we would have got it in the oven. Something would have happened. And then he also did extended school year that year. And so which I loved that. They picked him up on a bus and took him directly from our house to the school. It was great. So that was a good solution there too. So between the 20 hours of services and then the extended school year for whatever amount of weeks we did, we had that summer covered. So then we moved to Twin Falls in August. We literally closed on our house on the first day of school.
Oh my goodness.
Once again, I kind of just dropped the special needs kid into the lap of the school. It was like, hi, here's a lot. Have fun. And I tried.
Let me know how it goes.
Once again, tried to warn them, but they just didn't quite get it.
Right.
So I was like, I'm sorry. And so that was another rough year. We kind of had a rough time that second grade year. And I feel like maybe we would have figured it all out, but then it was 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020.
I think I blacked that part out.
Yeah, really. I think I did too. So, all my kids were home. It was tricky. It was tricky to figure out what we were doing with behavioral therapy. Were they here to help with school, or were they supposed to take him somewhere? We've never really did figure it out. Every day was an adventure. And
I can only imagine.
And then, yeah, it was hard. And of course, we didn't know, is school going to start in April again? Or, is it going to start May 1st? Or, never mind, it's not starting at all. It was just so hard to plan ahead. Oh, it was rough. But the good thing that did come out of that time is he had so much time with his sisters that he actually learned how to play pretend.
Oh, what a big deal.
Yeah, it was a really big deal because he'd never really pretended before. And so to see him, playing their games with them, and it was really cute, and it was really good for him. We ended up deciding to homeschool in the 2020, 2021 year.
Yeah.
Because our elementary school was going to do every other day and rotating Mondays.
Oh, no, you've seen that before.
I already know I hate the schedule. We're not doing that. So we homeschooled, which we all learned I'm terrible. The joke is that we discovered I'm more suited for administration than actual classroom teaching because I could make the chart and I could plan out what we were going to do. But when it came to actually teaching my kids anything, I was like, I don't know how this works. So it was an interesting year for all of us.
I can only imagine.
But because we did have a little extra time, I was like, you know what? I've wanted my son in speech therapy for a while. I just haven't felt like we've had the time for it. And so I got him into speech therapy about that time. And that was really good to get him doing some speech therapy and just kind of working on, he could talk, but just kind of working on more the parts of speech that he needed to work on and stuff. So that was good. And then in 2021, in the fall, we went back to our school. And I was really worried because I was like, okay, we never quite had this fully figured out in second grade. And now we're going to start fourth grade after a whole year of him being able to eat corn dogs and have fun whenever he wanted. So I was really worried. Fortunately, the school had changed principals. And the new principal was really accommodating. And so I emailed her before school started, and I was like, okay, here are all my concerns. I don't know how my kid's going to handle going back to school. And she had him come over, and she gave him a personal tour of the whole school and reminded him where the lunchroom was. And had him meet his teacher. And, it was not back to school night, so it wasn't crowded. It wasn't busy. It was just perfect. So we got off to a really good start in fourth grade, and then fifth grade was also really good. So it was kind of rough starting at that school, but when we restarted, I think everything went really well. And really, that's kind of where we are right now. We finished speech therapy not too long ago. He started occupational therapy and then finished that not too long ago. So we're still doing behavioral intervention stuff, but even that, I'm kind of like, I don't think we need this as much as we used to, but I'm hanging on to it because I don't know what middle school will bring and what puberty will bring. So I'm like, we'll keep our spot here.
The transitions never end.
Yeah, so I'm like, we'll probably need this, even though at the moment things are good, because now he's matured a lot, so he can be left alone in a room for a while. He doesn't fiddle with everything, and he can interact with people, and they understand what he's saying. He can be in loud places. And he self-advocates, oh, I need to remember to bring my headphones, and so,
wow.
So yeah, it's really, there's I look at this child that I went into the doctor's office with when he was 3. And, the doctor was like, have you considered autism? And I think about how difficult that 3-year-old was. And now I look at my 11-year-old and I'm like, yeah, we still have the autism, but like we've learned how to live with it and how to behave correctly. And it's very good.
Would you say that the early intervention really played a pivotal role in that?
Yes. Like, I can't imagine if we just done the whole wait and see thing, like, oh, well, maybe he'll outgrow it, or, oh, this is just a phase. I I can't even imagine, because it was so critical to have him in all the various interventions that we had him in throughout his life, because they helped him.
Yeah.
I always say, I'm like, therapists are miracle workers. Like, they do amazing things. When he learned how to tie his shoes, I was like, are you kidding me? I never thought he would tie his shoes. I thought we'd just do Velcro or bungee cords his entire life. And then within just a few sessions, the occupational therapist taught him how to do it.
Yeah, when you're the parent of an autistic child, the milestones that you celebrate really change.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true. I remember when we first were getting into the therapy when he was in first grade. The lady who did kind of our like goals and everything, she asked like, what is your she's like, what is a long-term goal? Like, what do you visualize? And I remember I said, I'm like, I would love for all my kids to be able to walk to the park without ending up on the news, without somebody getting kidnapped or somebody getting hurt or something. And at the time I was like, I cannot even imagine that. Like, that feels pie in the sky. Well, on Sunday, I took a nap, my husband took a nap, and one of my 12-year-old girls and my son went to the park and came back. I didn't even know they went. My husband knew they went, but I didn't even know they went until they came back. And I was like,
wow.
Oh my gosh, like, it happened. So, because of all the intervention and stuff, and I'm only one person. I can't do everything. Like, I'm the parent, but there's things I can't help my son do. And so to have another adult that comes in with skills and kind of with a different relationship too, because I'm his safe space. I can't push him as well as some other people with a different role in his life can push him.
Sure.
And so, like, one of his therapists taught him how to tell time on a face clock. Like, I couldn't do that. We didn't have that type of relationship, but he could learn from somebody else. So all the therapy, all the intervention, I'm all for it. So that's kind of our story. I don't know if you have any other questions, but.
Oh, I have one more. I'm curious. I know your son was very young when you were kind of doing your tour, your tour of the United States. But I'm curious if there was a big difference in services from state to state, or if you didn't really feel that because those weren't accessible to him at that time.
I don't know. I was so new to everything. Like, even when I went to my first IEP meeting, I was like, what are we doing? I just had no clue what was available or what the processes were. So I didn't notice a ton from state to state. And really, because we moved right as he aged out of infant toddler, I didn't know. Like, I couldn't compare those. The one thing I did notice, Utah, like, I was the fact that they didn't have a developmental preschool at every school, in every school district, like, super accessible. Let me rephrase that. They had one in every school district. They didn't have one at every school. And that was different to me. Because I knew, like, it was just very nice in Texas and in Alabama that they had pre-K as just like a standard, and then to go to Utah and Idaho where it's not a standard, that actually was kind of an adjustment.
And I think a lot of
Yeah.
parents, I know I did before I learned differently, that I just assumed that the services that are in Idaho were available in every state and vice versa, that we were all the same, and we're not.
hmm Yeah. And so, and like, I never went through whatever the equivalent to children's DDS is in Utah because I knew we weren't going to be there very long. So I couldn't tell you what that process is. Like, so I guess in every state I kind of had a different need. So
Yeah.
I never really compared. I do have to say that it is nice that there are services like the infant toddler program throughout each state. I don't know what they
Yes.
look like in every state, but it is really cool. Like, no matter where you are, that does exist. And then the IEPs, even though they don't transfer specifically, we did have to redo them when we moved, but they are legally binding. You know, I could show up in Utah with his Alabama IEP and be like, "Hey, we got this thing," and they were like, "Okay, yeah, we know what that is. We know, we know that he's going to need services." So it was nice that those things do kind of have like some standardization.
Right, that
So I
there's
wasn't going to,
continuity.
yeah. So I wasn't going to each state being like, "So how do we do it here?" You know? So I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. If you're in Idaho or planning on moving to Idaho and have any questions about systems or services for children with disabilities, please reach out to us on our website at ipulidaho.org. That's IPUL Idaho.org. Be sure to come back next time. Until then, I'm Allison, and it has been a wonderful experience talking with Valerie. And this has been Unlimited Parenting.
Thanks for listening.